Well, further sorrow for the Prime Minister was delivered on Saturday night in the West Australian election. Forget the poll that says that as a result, perhaps, of the controversies in the federal parliament and men and women marching yesterday, the Prime Minister is being punished for the culture at work in Canberra. There can be no excuse for the abuse of anyone, and certainly not the abuse of women in the workplace. The cry is for reform, but what shape does it take? I'd make a couple of simple points. There are too many people in the building. Government and non-government MPs have too many staff. I work for Prime Minister. Apart from typists, Prime Minister Fraser had a PA, an electorate secretary, 3 full-time staff. I was the speechwriter and senior advisor, the only one, and a part-time advisor, Melbourne University economics professor John Rose. That was it. The Prime Minister today has over 50 staff. They're falling over one another and have too much time on their hands. Too many in ministerial offices are party hacks, young ambitious grandstanders with no life experience, and they get on the terps on Friday night. We were not wowsers, we just never had time to frequent bars, let alone become intoxicated. There's now talk of the need to breath test and drug test workers, but make it clear that the booze culture has come to an end. And why shouldn't Parliament work normal hours, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m? On the multiple allegations that the government now faces and about which people are legitimately protesting, you can't change the culture if you can't change the behavioural standards. What's the maxim? The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. But while grappling with that, the Prime Minister can't ignore Western Australia. He's going to have to cop the Labor Party and Wayne Swan, of all people, gloating that the Liberals have been destroyed. But only for one reason. Their leader and the entire Parliamentary Party, and not just in WA, in Canberra, in New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria, Queensland, they're completely out of touch with reality. I was invited last year to attend a Liberal Party function in Victoria. All the luminaries were there. A newly minted female Liberal MP from a blue ribbon seat was invited to speak. The first thing to come out of her mouth was a comment about climate change. And this stuff's everywhere. They tried it in WA. Have a look at the result. As one of my correspondents says to me, any Conservative party that openly supports Greens policies and ideology deserves every kick in the guts that it receives. I will never support a Liberal Party, he says, that endorses the idiocy of emissions reductions net zero targets and abandons coal-fired energy sources. It defies all logic. Well, Scott Morrison has to consider this. They're giving a walk-up start to Anthony Albanese, of whom one of his colleagues said Albo is about as interesting as an open grave. But how does the Federal Liberal Party fight an election campaign in WA? Who'll man the booths at a federal election when no one from Canberra came near them? This time last week when they were in need of help. The coalition seems to forget the maths of it. There are 151 seats in the federal parliament. Terry McCrann has made this point splendidly, as I have often. The coalition won 23 seats in Queensland at the last federal election, Labor 6. In WA, the coalition won 11 seats, Labor 5. So, in 45 seats in Queensland and WA, the coalition won 34. That leaves across the rest of Australia 106 seats. Just stating it again, in Queensland and WA, the coalition won 34 seats. Overall in the election, they won 77. So of the remaining 106 seats across Australia, outside Queensland and WA, are you listening, Mr Morrison? The coalition won 43 out of 106. In the light of Saturday, is the coalition going to hold 11 seats to 5 in WA? And given the Adani issue will no longer be a factor, will the coalition win 23 seats to 6 in Queensland? On top of this, the JobKeeper stuff ends at the end of this month. Businesses will go broke. People will lose jobs. During coronavirus, state governments did as they pleased. Scott Morrison said kids should be in school. The state governments defied him. Scott Morrison said open the borders. The state governments defied him. But he kept on funding these premiers who were in open defiance of our Prime Minister. And they were fully funded. No sanctions. So with all this stuff swimming around and overwhelming him, the Prime Minister now has to take a stand on lockdowns and say simply to state premiers, you can lock down if you like and you can close the borders if you like, but there will be major financial penalties. Rank and file Conservatives are wanting the Morrison government to stand up to the left and get into the ring. They must understand one certain truth in life. Many people lose, not because they're beaten, but because they didn't fight.